Coming up on Network Africa. The United States cuts aid to Ethiopia over a controversial mega dam being built on a tributary of the River Nile. United Nations warns of arms buildup and virus surge in Libya. Plus, Zimbabwe's government plans to hand back 37 farms to foreign nationals covered by international agreement. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Tenyola Shoboale. The U.S. is cutting aid to Ethiopia over a controversial mega dam being built on a tributary of the River Nile. The move was triggered by Ethiopia's move to start filling the Grand Ethiopian Dam before reaching agreement with Egypt and Sudan. Egypt has long been opposed to any developments on the Nile that could reduce the amount of water it receives. Ethiopia says it needs the dam to provide a reliable electricity supply. Once fully operational, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam will be the largest hydroelectric plant in Africa and provide power to up to 65 million Ethiopians. While the U.S. has not said openly how much aid will be cut, a U.S. congressional source told Reuters news agency that up to $100 million or so will be affected, of which $26 million is funding that expires at the end of the financial year. Meanwhile, the U.S. Assistant Secretary for African Affairs, Tibor Nagy, has held talks with Rwandan ambassador to the U.S. over the arrest of Paul Rusesabagina, who was portrayed in a Hollywood film about the Rwandan genocide. Rwandan officials said 66-year-old Mr. Rusesabagina was arrested under an international warrant for leading terrorist movement. But his children have come out to say the allegation was false, accusing the Rwandan government of kidnapping him. Mr. Nagy tweeted after the meeting with Ambassador Matilde Mukatabana that the U.S. government expects Rwanda to provide humane treatment, adhere to the rule of law, and provide a fair and transparent legal process for Mr. Rusesabagina. Mr. Rusesabagina's family say their father, who is also a Belgian citizen and a U.S. green card holder, left his home in Texas and landed in Dubai last Thursday. The United Nations says that foreign supporters of both sides in the Libyan civil war are helping them stockpile weapons in breach of an arms embargo as coronavirus spirals out of control in the country. Acting Libya envoy Stephanie Williams told the UN Security Council that some 70 resupply flights had landed in eastern airports in support of the Libyan Arab armed forces of Khalifa Haftar since early July. In the same period, 30 flights and 9 cargo ships had carried material to western Libya to assist the international recognized government of national accord in Tripoli. However, she did not name the countries involved.
The immiseration of the Libyan people is further compounded by the debilitating effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, which appears to be spiraling out of control. Some 70 resupply flights landed in eastern airports in support of the LAAF, while 30 resupply flights were dispatched to airports in western Libya in support of the GNA. With the stakes so high, any such reckless action risks igniting large-scale confrontation with the devastating consequences this would entail. It is imperative that you use your influence to impress on all sides that now is the time for restraint. The number of confirmed cases has more than doubled in the last 2 weeks, with 15,156 cases and 250 recorded deaths as of the 1st of September. Exponential increases are a worrying trend, with community transmission now reported in some of Libya's main cities, including Tripoli and Sebha. We are, however, looking at the problem through a keyhole, as persistent shortages in testing capabilities, adequate healthcare facilities, and contact tracing mean that the true scale of the pandemic in Libya is likely to be much higher. Handling of the pandemic is constrained by the fragmentation of health sector institutions, the extreme shortage of medical supplies and workers, as well as a funding shortage. Nearing full collapse after more than 9 years of conflict, the healthcare system is unable to respond to the additional weight placed by the COVID-19 patients, along with maintaining normal health services.
Still on security, the UN mission in South Sudan says it will set up a peacekeeping base in Lobonok, where 6 bodyguards of Vice President James Wani-Iga were killed last month. The mission cited other attacks on civilians and humanitarian convoys in the region as the reason for setting up the new base. The head of the mission, David Shearer, said the new base will allow provision for a protective presence in the area. According to the UN mission, there's been several attacks on aid workers in the last few days in the area. Kenya has frozen the assets of 9 people it accuses of funding Somalia's militant group Al-Shabaab. Officials said the move was part of its renewed counter-terrorism effort aimed at tackling domestic terrorists. In a statement, Internal Security Minister Fred Matiang'i said the freezing of assets of the 9 Kenyans would ensure they no longer finance Al-Shabaab group within the borders. He also warned that the group was recruiting, radicalizing and planting operatives among civilians to advance their agenda of extremism and terrorism. The announcement comes as Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta told global leaders that the COVID-19 pandemic had heightened the potential for terrorist acts, worsened the refugee crisis, and led to the proliferation of small arms and light weapons in the Horn of Africa region. Kenya has faced numerous attacks from Al-Shabaab since deploying its troops to Somalia in 2011 to combat the group. Japan's environment minister says its government is considering further assistance to help Mauritius deal with an oil spill after a Japanese-owned boat struck a coral reef. The MV Wakashio struck a coral reef on Mauritius' southeast coast on July 25th and later began leaking oil. During a video call with his Mauritius counterpart, Shinjiro Kozumi said he would do his best to work on Japan's mitigation efforts.
And I would like to express my warm sympathy to the people of the Republic of Mauritius. Civil liability for pollution damage will be discussed and settled between the parties concerned. However, as head of the Ministry of the Environment of Japan, committed to the mission of conserving biodiversity, I would like to do my best to help contribute toward any mitigation efforts.
Mauritius is highly dependent on its coastal and maritime environment. The sustainability of the major economic activities and protective functions are totally dependent on the vitality, aesthetics and ecological functioning of the coastal and maritime ecosystem.
The state-owned Herald newspaper of Zimbabwe reports that the government plans to hand back a mere 37 farms to foreigners covered by international agreement. The farms were taken under the controversial land reform program initiated by then-President Robert Mugabe to tackle colonial-era land grabs. The government had no intention of reversing the land reform program, but it had an obligation to consider its own constitution as well as international treaties and agreements, land, agriculture, water and rural resettlement. That was the Minister of Agriculture saying. Indigenous farmers who were dispossessed of their properties during the land reform program would also be given the opportunity to get their land back or accept compensation. In total, a minute proportion, 3.2% of beneficiaries of the land reform program would be affected by latest decisions. The U.S. has said compensating farmers is one of the requirements for it to lift economic sanctions against Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe opposition politician Jacob Ngavurume has been granted bail in his fourth attempt since being detained on July 20th after calling for anti-government protests against corruption and the country's economic crisis. The High Court Judge Siyabona Moshitu on Wednesday granted his appeal against the ruling of a lower court that had denied him bail and said the magistrate erred. The politician was ordered to pay 50,000 Zimbabwe dollars, surrender his passport, and report to the police 3 times a week. He was arrested on the same day a prominent journalist, Hopewell Chinono, and charged with inciting the public to commit violence. The 2 men have denied the allegations. Chinono, who had tweeted his support for the protest, was also released on Wednesday and ordered to pay bail of $120 by the High Court, which declared that a magistrate who had earlier denied his bail had been misdirected in his decision. Nigel Yamatumbu, Zimbabwean journalist, joins us now on Network Africa for more on the situation in the country. Nigel, let's begin with the release of the opposition members. What reaction is this getting?
Well, real relief right there. I mean, after 47 days inside, in prison without trial, 40 days without a real justification as to why they did not enjoy their constitutional right to a bail before trial. So it's indeed welcome development for both Hopewell Chinono, who is a journalist, and not necessarily perhaps an activist, as it were, and even for the opposition member, Jacob Ngavurume. It's a real relief for them and their families, and also generally perhaps give some hope for real justice and the opening up of democratic space in Zimbabwe.
So what exactly is the implication of the court's verdict on these people? What happens now?
In my submission, I think the impact of them being arrested in the first place and the message that was put across by them spending 47 nights in prison, I think no one really in Zimbabwe would want to go down that path. No one would really want to challenge the hegemony, the corrupt behavior. No one would even imagine or want to petition or demonstrate. So I guess the message, the impact has already been done insofar as instilling a bit of a culture of fear among citizens, among activists, and within the opposition. But it will be interesting to then see whether they would actually be convicted, which would be a different case altogether. But for now, at least it gives a semblance of hope that perhaps, including the negotiation that is happening with the South African ruling party saying they would come and be talking around this political stalemate, political crisis in the country, perhaps that could be the dawn of a bit of a new chapter around free expression and all those corollary rights.
Nigel, let's just move on now to the situation with the farmers. You know, just 37 farms, the state TV calls a mere 37. Aren't there thousands of farmers who would want to apply for their lands? And what more can you tell us about this? How did we get here?
Well, we've got some clarity a bit from the ruling party officials, from the generally broad and vague press statement that was initially issued as to what are the policy intentions of government. So it's not a surprise that it's just 37 because the farms that were being referred to are the government-to-government farms under a program that was known as BIPA, and therefore is not targeted at the broader white commercial farmers as it had as it had appeared in the first place. So essentially, what is going to be happening is that those very few farmers that belong to that government agreement are the ones that are going to be entitled to the compensation or to be given land. But the system and the way it has been conducted is unfair. The opposition has actually also done a press statement to say there should also be compensating the farm workers. They should broaden the horizon and do this in accordance with the Constitution, which requires an act of Parliament to for carrying out this restitution. And the majority of white commercial farmers, some that I've spoken to, are also not happy about this latest development.
All right, then, Nigel Yamatumbu, Zimbabwean journalist. It's always a pleasure speaking to you on Network Africa. Thanks once again.
Sure, bye-bye.
Still to come on the program. A beautiful pink sight to watch as long-missed pink flamingos return to Kenya's Lake Nakuru. Details in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. More than 350 migrants have been allowed to leave a rescue ship in the Mediterranean Sea. Rescue organization Sea Watch says the group was transferred to a quarantine vessel off Sicily's coast. The migrants include 150 people rescued by the Louis Michel, a boat funded by British artist Banksy. On Saturday, the UN's refugee agency issued an urgent appeal for those on board the rescue vessels to be allowed to disembark safely. The Sea Watch 4 ship arrived in Palermo on Wednesday, 11 days after it took on the first migrants. Dozens of people later joined from the Louis Michel after the Italian Coast Guard evacuated 49 of the most vulnerable from Banksy's ship. The visit of Nigeria's Speaker of Parliament to Ghana is a blessing. That's according to Mr. Kizito Obiora, the National Vice President of the Nigerian Union of Trader Association in Ghana. Mr. Obiora, who met with the Speaker in person, says Honorable Gbajabiamila Miller came with a message that brings hopes to the trader.
Mr. Speaker visit to Ghana, His Excellency Honorable Femi Bajamila. His visit to Ghana, in fact, the only thing I will say is that it's a great blessing to we traders in Ghana. Actually, I have opportunity to be one of the Nigerian traders who met with him yesterday at Nigerian High Commission. And I listened very carefully to him. And I think he came with a very big message of hope, which I'm sure that it must surely come to pass. In fact, one big message I captured from him is he made it very clear to us that his visit here is for him to meet with his counterpart so that the two parliaments, Nigerian House and the Ghana House, will sit down and see the best way forward for this, our predicament here in Ghana. At the end of the day, he promised us that at the end of the day, whatever will be the outcome of it will be duly signed by the both house, both Nigeria and Ghana. So that now we traders will know our left and right. We will know, yes, this is how it's supposed to be. If you will not able to meet up or whatever condition they will give us, then we know if anybody who is not ready to meet up with that can just look for elsewhere or another thing to do.
To to the COVID-19 pandemic now. South Africa is no longer among the 5 countries most affected by the coronavirus. That's according to the World Health Organization. Peru now has the 5th highest number of confirmed COVID-19 cases, with over 663,000 reported cases on Wednesday. South Africa, which accounts for half of all cases confirmed in Africa, has had over 630,500 cases. Although South Africa is still the hardest hit country in Africa, it has experienced a sustained decline in new cases for the past 6 weeks. Total cases in Africa have been on a downward trend for about a month. There has been an overall 14% decrease in the number of new cases being reported each week on the continent. Torrential rains and floods continue to batter and destroy thousands of homes in Sudan, and this poses a threat to the coronavirus fight in the country. The United Nations says the disaster has contaminated crucial water supplies that is urgently needed during the pandemic.
The United Nations is warning of record floods in Sudan that have devastated infrastructure, cutting off humanitarian access and preventing people from taking measures to protect themselves against COVID-19. Dozens have died and thousands of homes have been destroyed after heavy rains triggered severe flooding and a rise of the River Nile by up to nearly 17.5 meters, the highest level in 100 years, according to Sudanese authorities. Around 125,000 of those affected are refugees and internally displaced persons, Shabia Mantou of the UN's refugee agency said on Tuesday.
Roads have become too muddy for traffic to pass, making it extremely difficult or impossible to deliver humanitarian aid to some communities.
According to the UN, around 2,000 water sources, vital amid the coronavirus pandemic, have been contaminated or are non-functional.
Hygiene and sanitary levels have plummeted due to flooded latrines and contaminated water supplies, preventing people from exercising necessary COVID prevention measures such as regular hand washing.
The world body says 37,000 homes have been destroyed and another 39,000 damaged, and that the government has declared a state of emergency in Khartoum, where more than 21,000 people have been affected.
8 years ago, rising water levels in Kenya's Lake Nakuru drove away the clouds of pink-coloured flamingos that were the park's biggest draw. Rangers say the disappearance triggered a drop in visitor numbers for the Nakuru National Park, but now they're back. The return has rekindled hopes of a gradual rebound in an area heavily reliant on tourists for employment and revenues.
From the year 2012, we started experiencing fluctuation in the number of flamingos in Lake Nakuru National Park. That is the time the lake started to swell. So, in one way or another, the flamingos had to migrate from Lake Nakuru National Park in search of better breeding grounds and feeding grounds in other Rift Valley lakes. Flamingos have been a selling point for Lake Nakuru National Park. Most of the visitors associate Lake Nakuru National Park with flamingos. So since 2012, we have seen there's been a drop in visitation, and even the visitors ask about flamingos. But with the increase now of the number of flamingos, we have started seeing visitors also increasing. Most of the visitors are now coming back. Just to encourage people to visit Lake Nakuru National Park, there's a lot to see. The park is home to more than 450 bird species and over 50 mammal species. So there's a lot to see. And also the flamingos are here. So for those who would want to see the flamingos, they can come and see them.
Glad to see them back. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tenyola Shoboale.